Hi, this is Charlie Mato-Toyela from BlueBearFlutes.com, making another video today on how to make a special and custom flute totem. The totem, of course, is what we call it these days. I mean, there's so many other names, and I want to make sure that we use one that reflects not only what the popular culture wants to call it, but also is not disrespectful to the flute or our ancestors. So, for lack of a better word, plus we're talking English here, we're going to call it a flute totem. I have called it a flute block for years and years and years, whether it be shaped like a bird or a feather or a snake or whatever. I still call it a flute block. However, these days I think most people recognize the flute totem as being the little piece that sits on top of your flute. It would sit right on this area here so that the sound will be created by the wind traveling below it. With the Native American flute, it is a very crucial piece of the mechanism that makes it work, and you can have a simple one that is either flat, or you can have an ornate type shape, or you can have one shaped like an animal, and we offer a lot of different types on our website. Of course, I've always offered to make any kind people have asked for, and likewise we've made some pretty interesting ones. I've had everything from a dash hund to a let's see, snowflake in recent times, and then in the past I've made some Bigfoots, and I've got a list here of the other totems that people would like to see us make on videos. The first one being a hummingbird, which is a real typical totem that we make pretty regularly. A fox, one of our favorites. I think that was one that I put on your birthday flute or something like a year or so ago. The eagle, which is probably one of the most other common flute totems we make. A cougar, make those all the time. The horse, we have two different style horses. The running horse is my new favorite one, and I think that's the one we're going to make for that video. This is just a list of totems people have requested us make a video for, and we're going to do all of them, probably most of them this week, so keep an eye out for them if you haven't seen them. The turtle totem is one of my favorites. It's a very easy totem to make, which gives you the opportunity to make it very complex. So we'll talk about that. The leaping deer is the only one on my list that I've never made. We've made deer, and we've made a mule deer aside from a deer, and then we've also made a moose, and it seems like there's one other, but we've never made any of them leap. So we're going to do that. And last but not least, one very good friend up in the northwest of the United States is an avid Bigfoot fan and has me cut out some blanks for his Bigfoot totems pretty regularly, and he makes some really neat Bigfoot flutes, and we've made a handful of Bigfoot flutes ourselves. But we're going to have the typical Bigfoot on this totem video, and it'll be one of the last ones we'll make, I believe. So we've got these few that are in requests that we're going to go through, and we'll get to those in just a day or so. So I guess following this video, you'll see next a hummingbird, a fox, eagle, cougar, horse, turtle, leaping deer, and Bigfoot. This video is going to show you how to make a seahorse. Now, I know I've told you in the past how we make our totems and the technique I use to do this. This technique is very simple, and anyone making a flute totem can follow it. You can also, at the time of this video, download the pattern off of my website. It's on the info, INFO. It's up at the top. You can click on info, and it'll take you to the page. Down at the bottom of the info page, you'll see a list of different totems that we have downloadable designs for. However, having said that, all I have done is taken a silhouette of a seahorse here, and I've made it in several different sizes. Looking at it, I believe that this little guy is probably the one that's going to fit on a larger one of my flutes better. One slightly smaller than this would fit on our standard size, like a key of A flute, probably better. Although, in my experience, I've seen people make flute totems that were that size and put them on tiny flutes, and they still look good. They look really good. So it's like my dad used to say, and I don't know if I've quoted him today or not, but it's 6 of one and half a dozen of another. That means basically whatever you like. I found a piece of scrap wood. This is a piece of white cedar, otherwise known as juniper, that I found to be exactly the right size for that little guy. And if you want to follow me over here and see how we're going to do this, we'll go to the next step. Okay, so of course one of the first steps was choosing the animal that we wanted to make, or you know, whatever we want to make the totem out of, in the case of those snowflake lovers out there. We chose that. We found a silhouette because the silhouettes typically show you a picturesque version of this item. It could be an actual photograph of a seahorse if you want, and you would have a great deal of depth to go into with it to make it happen. However, with the one I've chosen, it is quite simple, and it's just a matter of cutting and getting the shapes and sizes and all that kind of stuff the way you need it. So I got a piece of carbon paper here. I'm going to sit it on top of my tiny little piece of wood. Many of you may decide to use a larger piece of wood just for convenience sake. Then I'm going to feel around to make sure that I've got it within an area large enough to make this guy, which it feels like it. Then it's just a matter of tracing it out. You know, you can make the size of this totem just a little bit different by tracing inside of the outline of the seahorse. You can make it smaller that way, and you can also make it larger by tracing more on the outside. If you had printed this out and got out to the shop and decided that you wanted to make one that was just a 1/4 of an inch larger, you might be surprised of your artistic abilities when you start tracing something about a 1/4 of an inch outside of its outline. A lot of people believe that they can't draw, that they can't carve or anything like this, and by all means, any of you that is interested in carving, this is a fantastic technique that I believe is a very easy way to make something nice. As far as drawing though, if you can trace this thing, you're capable of drawing him. And if you can trace it a 1/4 of an inch outside of his line, then you can really say that you have the ability to draw it. When you're tracing it, is it really fully your own? In so many ways, yes, and in others, no. But in life, how much of this is really your own in the first place? Somebody could come along and snatch it from you and say, I want that, and then you've given it up. But we'll go ahead and go over to the saw and begin cutting here, and I'll show you some ideas that I had with regards. Keep in mind, we are cutting a 2-dimensional object out of a 3-dimensional piece of wood, and we're going to turn it back into a 3-dimensional object. So a little bit of tricks involved, but not that difficult, I promise. Okay, so you'll notice that the way that I'm going to cut this out may not completely reflect all the detail on those ridges on his body. As a matter of fact, I'm going to cut them out kind of rounded, and I could have drawn it that way if I wanted to, but I like, for display and demonstration purposes, to show you what it is that we're working with. And there's a number of other ways you can do this as well. I had considered actually drilling. Let me show you here. Drilling this out would actually leave those ridges in place. However, it's only going to leave them in place in a virtual 2-dimensional shape. So when we were to go and round it off and sand it down, most of the ridges would then disappear. So there's lots of stuff to consider. I don't know how many times I've said that today. One surefire way to tell if your item looks close to what it should is to sand the faces of it, front and back, and then look at it again with no pencil marks on it and see if it looks like something recognizable. Okay, so I I think we've got something that looks pretty much like a seahorse there. I would suggest while you're cutting to keep in mind these thin areas that you cut out. They may break, so if you can learn how to work around that, that's good. The next thing I'm going to do is put some dimension into this guy. I mean, for example, they have kind of a plump belly, especially the males. Their head's going to be a little bit narrower. Eventually, when I get to detail, I'm going to make his beak a little bit narrower. The fin back here is going to be a little bit more narrow. It's probably going to taper small here, small there, and then he's going to need some rounding. And if we like, we can go and put those ridges back in him after we see what it looks like from there. So if you want to watch me just do some general sanding and shaping, then we'll take it over and do the fine work on it and get done. Okay, so let's take it over to a rotary tool and some sandpaper and see what we can come up with. Okay, so some of the things that we need to focus on here is going to be his beak. If you look, he's got kind of a Donald Duck shaped beak right now. We need to make it more of a tube type snout, like a proboscis on a mosquito maybe. So because of the angle and size of our sander we were using, we can only make such a taper, and likewise we need to taper some of his other features down a little bit. This fin in the back is one of those other features, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. If I want it to be just a little bitty fin poking out, or if I want it to be like it is now. But I do know that the bottom needs to be, see, his tip of his tail is too fat in comparison to the rest of his tail. It should continually get skinnier as it curls around. So let's do that and see where we can go from here. Okie doke. So, it may not look like a whole lot, but to me, I can see that he is shaping up. It's good to round off anything there that you need to do with the sandpaper. If you can use a rotary tool or something to do that, that's fine. But I'd like to stop right there and put in my little plug on safety. Number one, you should always be wearing safety goggles and any other safety equipment that you need to use for whatever project. Number two, if you do not own a Dremel and don't think that you would feel comfortable using one, it may not be a good idea for you to try it. Of course, there are a number of other brands of rotary tools, some of them more powerful, less powerful. I use one that suits my needs. There's so many others out there, and I've used quite a bit of them, and I like them. However, like I say, it may not be the safest thing for you to use. And as far as the way that you would be able to make something like this without a rotary tool or a saw, there are countless methods that you can use, anything from a coping saw to a pocket knife to just sandpaper. I could have actually cut this whole thing out with just a piece of sandpaper. And many of you are thinking, well, let's see you do that on video, but it would take me about 3 or 4 hours to do something that I can do here in about 10 or 15 minutes. So please be careful, be safe. Follow any instructions, rules, guidelines necessary to do that. And please, if you have someone that can help you, if you're not capable of doing this kind of thing on your own, make sure that they are also safe. It is very, very important. So, having said that, my little plug on safety, I would like to mention to you that carving the seahorse out reminds me of something that I have to share with you. It would be completely wrong of me not to. when I was growing up, I had some very unique friends in life, and two of my very good and unique friends were Ed and Catherine Hayes. Now, some of you might think, well, I know an Ed and Catherine Hayes. I don't know if you know my Ed and Catherine Hayes. They both have passed on and taken the journey on to the next world. Some very powerful, amazing people that shaped my childhood. And I say they remind me because she would always be painting things like seahorses and fish and ocean scenes, and he would always be carving them out in wood. And I think I've seen some of the seahorses he carved before, and I know that I probably would never do his talent justice. However, these days, you know, we have computers and things that can help us print out a design of a seahorse. And a little further back, people had to do a lot of this either with a photograph of a seahorse or something from their imagination. But I will tell you guys a little secret that I learned from him. He's probably where I get this idea from, by the way, because I remember seeing countless books open in his workshop with little paper clips or notes, sticky notes on them, saved at a certain page to show what it was he was carving out. And he would do the same thing that I'm doing. He would find an image of something and he would carve it from there. It could be anything as even a 3D image of something. You could have a three-dimensional object and he would carve out something to copy it. It helps when you have that in hand. But anyway, just remembering back to my friends. So the next thing I'm going to do is sit here and sand the sky for a few moments. I guess you can get kind of an idea of what it looks like now, and I'm sure we'll have to fast forward through all this part because it's kind of boring and slow. Okay, so you get kind of an idea about this, and as many of you probably noticed, his little tail snapped right off while I was sanding. Not terrifically uncommon. Anytime you have a fine piece of work like this, that can happen. Once again, carving it out a little bit larger, or if you didn't want something like that to happen, carving it out of something harder like a piece of oak may have saved you there. But never fear. Once again, something I learned from my buddy Mr. Hayes. Just a dab of super glue will do it. And most woodworkers will tell you that super glue is a veritable fix-all. This totem doesn't need to go out on an order or anything. It's just one that we needed to make this video with. So I am sure that it will turn out perfect. Let's see. It's actually pretty stuck together already. I'm going to put just a drop of glue in the seam to make sure that it stays. The more glue that soaks into the surrounding wood fiber and material, the stronger it will be. As a matter of fact, someone else that I knew in my youth told me about a little machine that he used to have. It was basically a chamber that they put cyanacrylic glue in one area and put an item like this in the chamber, sucked a vacuum on it, and once he got it vacuumed down, they would open the chamber and let the glue go into it, and it would soak into all the pores of the item and turning it basically hard as a rock. So that's something to consider, with all these things to consider. Let's see. Let's do a little tiny bit more sanding around some of these areas. Now, don't think you have to stop at the level of sanding I'm doing. You can actually take this a lot further and get down with a piece of 4 and then 600 grit paper. I don't know if 1200 grit paper would do you any good on this, considering the angles and curves and all that. It's really more for metal anyway, in my opinion. But a piece of 400 grit paper would make this guy shine really well. Just keep in mind that you've got to prepare it before you get to that point. So he's looking pretty good. Now, I had mentioned something about the ridges. I've considered using my Dremel here and going back, my rotary tool, and grinding these ridges into him. But honestly, at this point, I think I've decided I like him like he is. Do you like him like he is? Yeah, so got the okay by the camera woman. I think that we're going to leave him like he is. I think he's pretty well done, and the only thing he has left to do is sand this area that we broke a moment ago and mount him on a block. And that's the easy part, as I will show you. So the next step is pretty simple. I have a flute block bottom, and I have ground a little area into it that this guy fits into a little bit. It's not perfect, you know. It'd be nice if it fit flush and smooth and butted right up against it exactly the way it needs to, but it's not exactly perfect, and I couldn't afford to spend a whole lot of time on that. So, as usual, a little tiny bit of glue. A little glue in the bottom here, which is actually going to be a good thing for that crack, because it will help hold that broken piece of tail in place and make him look pretty cool. So we'll take a picture of that for you to take a look at. However, I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I hope you found some use in it. You know, I know that everyone wants to have their own fancy special totem for their flute. Why not a seahorse? I think this little guy looks great. Probably one of my favorites I've made yet. So thank you very much for your suggestions, and you know, I hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions or any video requests or anything like that that you'd like to make, we receive those on our website, as well as which bluebearflutes.com, of course, as well as our Facebook page, which you can find us on Blue Bear Flutes and Blue Bear Arts on Facebook, and we get into the occasional request here on YouTube as well for a new type of totem to be made. So, you know, anytime you get ready to do that kind of thing, feel free to send us a message and we'll go from there. I'm going to put just a little bit more glue in it so it can be in there good and solid. We'll let him dry and find a pretty flute to ton him onto. Once again, this is Charlie Mato-Toyela signing out for bluebearflutes.com. Come and see us again really soon. Take care.